Now on this, on inflammation, and you're talking about how it affects the organs and the heart, what we're really looking at are kind of low levels of excessive inflammation. So you're not in that sweet spot. It's a little higher than it should be. And if you look at it from an acute, standpoint, not going to do too much bad to you. But you do this over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, then you start to see some damage and some problems. You mentioned heart disease. When the arteries are slightly inflamed, from what I've understood, and I've always wanted to bring this out. In fact, I've wanted to ask you about this for a long time. From what I understand, your body uses cholesterol as a way to bolster the walls of your arteries, almost like spackle, to kind of prevent what's happening to cause any problems. And then over time, that becomes a problem. And that's what we get. That's when we get heart attacks. Is that, did I say that right?
100%. But here, so that's why cholesterol and heart disease, and we'll say it's atherosclerosis, where we get the hardening of the arteries.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's think of it this way. Like, people like to say arachidonic acid is the bad guy. No, cholesterol is the bad guy. And it's like, well, that's not how it works. And the reason is that not everybody who has high levels of cholesterol has a heart attack, right? It's only like 50% of the people.
Yeah.
Well, the other 50% of people don't have high cholesterol. So like, how is that possible? Well, it's because there's so many layers to this. So there's LDL, which is the more oxidized-based cholesterol. It's actually just a low density, and what it means is that it actually falls to the surface of the artery, the endothelial tissue, like you were just saying. So when there's inflammation, it needs to be patched. And that's really it. If not, literally the artery itself, the wall will collapse or explode. So it uses that, but it also uses calcium. And here's the interesting part. So calcium, calcified tissues, right, becomes hard.
Yeah.
So now, because cholesterol is not necessarily hard, it's just like glue. It's like toothpaste. And so that by itself, that's fairly flexible, although as it builds up, you can't push the blood through as well. And when eventually it's completely occluded, okay, well, that artery no longer functions. And so now we have occluded artery, and now we're talking about like double, triple, quadruple bypass, right? So that you're trying to open up all these arteries. And they've got some really wild medical interventions now for that, like things that literally look like corkscrews that go through. I mean, it's wild.
By the way, the reduction in deaths from heart attacks, I had a cardiovascular surgeon that I trained for a while, and he said that it was one of the greatest breakthroughs. They can actually put a device in the artery, close off two ends, put an anticoagulant in there, and literally like roto everything, and have it wash out. And he says that, because I asked him, I said, "Do you think these statins have reduced lots of heart deaths?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "It's this," and he told me, he goes, "That really made a big difference." Kind of wild.
I'm very suspect on statins. It causes cardiomyopathy. It weakens the heart. You can die from a weak heart, just like you can die from heart attack, high cholesterol. But why this is important is because we can't look at cholesterol alone. We actually have to look at these high levels of omega-6s, creating inflammation in the arteries. And then as those arteries become stiffer, well, now what are the main causes or what could that lead to? Okay, hypertension and cardiovascular risk. So now those are the two main reasons for all like mortality. Right. So it's like those are the top two. Then after that's diabetes, and then there's cancer. And so when we look at inflammation can cause diabetes as well. So this is really important to look at this particular topic. And the other reason why I bring up arachidonic acid is because your first symptom, and I heard this not too long ago, the first symptom of a heart attack, I don't know if you guys know what this is. It's pretty wild. It's not pain and numbness in the left arm, or, a little bit of stiffness or flushness or fever. The main symptom of a oncoming heart attack is actually sudden death. And that's the wild thing about it. Wow. Meaning like there's no symptom for over 50% of the people.
Oh, right.
Oh,
wow.
And so there's no second chance. Like there's no getting to the hospital. Like that's it.
There's no warning.
And 25% of the people who will have a heart attack, 75% of those people are men, but 25% of those people will have that before the age of 55. And so it's not just like something that we should think about when we get into our 60s when it's most prevalent, right? Because a common age for a heart attack in a male is around 65. In a woman, it's around 72, 73. But 25% of those are before the age of 55. And so this is why I bring it up for your audience now. It's like, pay attention to it in nobody's gonna pay attention to their 20s. It'd be great if they did. Yeah. But 30s, 40s, like, because you don't get occluded arteries 2 years before you have a heart attack.
Is that getting worse or better? Like, is that number coming down? Was it like 55, 60, 70 before, and now it's in its 50s? Are we getting worse or better in that situation?
We're getting worse. And you can look at the early 1900s versus the early 2000s, or we're kind of moving out of that pace now. And heart attacks was not one of the top. killers back then. And so that's why you can't just blame it on food, like meat alone. Like that's not fair to do that, because I think back in the day, there was also just less consumption. So like you could eat foods, you were more active. Activity plays such a huge role in this, of telling your muscles that they actually need more protein. So think of it this way. Standard American diet, you're eating lots of meat, lots of fat, lots of grains. All right, so very high in arachidonic acid and omega-6s. But you're not training, you're not exercising, and so there's no uptake in protein synthesis. There's no need for any of these things, and so it just goes to what? Well, just pure inflammation. So arachidonic acid increases something called prostaglandin series 2. Very, very inflammatory, and that is what Advil or natural herbs do to kind of block that. So there's something called butterbur and quercetin, which you guys have probably talked about before. Those things are all kind of natural anti-inflammatory. Stinging nettles, which you could use instead of the Advil if you choose to. Again, I have to give my disclaimer now. I'm not here to provide any medical advice, medical treatment plans, medical cures, but we can look into that as alternatives. My recommendation is balance your omega-3s to your omega-6s, so you don't have to really worry about the food end of it, as much.